evening to one and all present here. I, Hani Kurana, student of BJMC, second semester, consider it my greatest honor to welcome you all for the second edition of the world's first 10-day digital live international conference, ICAN4. ICAN is being organized by Delhi Metropolitan Education in collaboration with School of Communication and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. It's my greatest honor to announce that ICAN4 is being supported by Indian Council of Social Science Research. Before moving forward, I would like to brief you about the previous sessions of ICAN that were a huge success. ICAN 1 was conducted in the month of March 2018 on the topic India and Changing Aspects of News. ICAN 2 was conducted in November 2018 on the topic all about Indian cinema and alternate networks. ICAN 3 was all about issue of community, agenda, and news. The hashtag of the conference was #conference for change. And now we are here with ICAN 4, the world's first 10-day digital live international conference. The theme for this year's conference is Information, Communication, and Artificial Networks. And the hashtag for the conference is Communication Redefined. ICAN4 would not have been possible without the support of our partners. I express my gratitude towards them. ICAN4 has 4 knowledge partners: KR Mangalam University, Gurugram, Haryana; Adamus University, Kolkata; Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Mass Communication, Bhopal; and Vigyan Prasar, Government of India. ICAN4 has also partnered with Department of Communication and Journalism, Guwahati University, Assam, and our international partner is Institute for International Journalism, EW Scripps School of Journalism, Ohio University, USA. The media partner for the conference is the Policy Times. The ICAN4 has seen the participation of about 60 eminent scholars from 5 different continents and 11 countries, that are India, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Bangladesh, USA, Mexico, France, Italy, Australia, and Ghana. More than 100 media educators and researchers have collected here to present their papers in the conference. ICAN4 covers 36 live sessions, including 9 technical sessions, 3 workshops, 7 panel discussions, 3 master sessions, and 10 master classes. It's a matter of great honor that all the technical sessions of this edition of ICAN are being chaired and co-chaired by women scholars representing different states of the country. I would also like to tell that at DME Media School, we have our student body SPARK, that stands for Student with Positive Attitude and Resonating Communication. We also have official newsletter named Journalism@DME, a fortnightly publication that covers all the major activities happening in and out the campus. It is a student-centric newsletter carried out entirely by them under the supervision of the faculty members. DME TV is our official YouTube channel where you can find the playlist related to all our events, lecture series, film festivals, and all the conferences. You can also attend our live sessions through the official Facebook page. For more information, follow us on our social media handles, whose links are being shared in the chat box. You can also visit official page of ICAN4 for more information. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School, Director DME Studios and Production, Director International Relations, Delhi Metropolitan Education, Noida, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Ani. Everybody is welcome this evening, though our guest, the expert for this workshop, Dr. Aaron Atkins. Good morning to him because he has taken a lot of pains for doing this workshop for us. He had to wake up early in the morning because there is a time difference of 11 and a half hours from India. So we are really grateful to him that he has taken so much pains for our sake. And since he is an expert in this area, he is a media educator and he has a keen interest in technology. So he knows hands-on so many things which could be of use to the students of journalism. So that will be his focus on the workshop that he is taking, how the emerging technologies, the use of those technologies can be done in journalism. So it will be a completely 360-degree virtual reality storytelling. So it would be very interesting for the students. I am sure of that. So I will not take from his time, and then I will be looking forward to his session. Over to you, Han.
Now, I would like to welcome our guest of the day. Today, we have Dr. Aaron Atkins with us. Dr. Aaron Atkins is a former newspaper journalist and an assistant professor of digital media at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. He earned his master's degree in communication from Virginia Tech in 2016 and his PhD in mass communication from the prestigious E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University in 2019. His research interests include journalism and message processing, audience perception, and interaction with emerging technology and tech-oriented media effects. He teaches courses in multimedia journalism, digital media production, and 360-degree VR storytelling. I request Dr. Aaron Atkins to take the session forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, so hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I have been working with immersive media and new technology or emerging technology for about 6 years now. I studied it as a part of my dissertation at Ohio University under Dr. Shrivastava at the E.W. Scripps School of Journalism, and I'm pleased to be with you all today. So thank you for having me first and foremost. As I go through the session, I will be talking about a couple of different concepts and how 360 virtual reality works in context of journalism and some of the philosophical and contextual mindsets and approaches that we have to understand in order to really kind of approach this new medium as a storytelling device. Now, there are several similarities between digital media production that we're all familiar with and 360 virtual reality digital media production. However, there are some stark differences that affect the ways that we use this type of technology to tell meaningful stories in a fashion that our audiences can understand and comprehend. So we're going to look at some of the key concepts that really kind of help inform this technology, some of the roots, some of the differences between some of the emerging technologies that we often find ourselves in the virtual reality game or 360 game, kind of differentiating between augmented reality, virtual reality, 360 VR, and other forms of immersive media, such like that. So we'll look at some of the differences there, and then we'll look at some prime and positive examples about how journalists and storytellers, documentary storytellers and journalists are using the technology today over the last 3 years to produce some really solid content. Some of it's very different in nature and scope. Some of it is very simple. Some of it is very complex. So one of the challenges that I'll have today is trying to demonstrate some of that technology using my computer screen instead of the head-mounted display, because when you're looking at a 360 or virtual reality environment on a 2D screen, it makes it a little less impressive. However, we're going to do our best here to kind of demonstrate that. And I'll include some of the links for the examples that I'll be using that are publicly available online for you guys to peruse at your own leisure if you wanted to check it out in the future. So this session is going to be split into two, today and tomorrow for an hour each. So the first session today, we'll take a look at the medium itself. We'll introduce the technology, the relevant terminology, as well as its practical, as well as a few theoretical considerations, and highlight journalism and documentary pieces published over the last 3 years as some examples of storytelling viability for both content creator and audience perspectives. Now, the second session tomorrow, we're going to focus more on the practicalities of the VR production process, the cameras, the audio, the programs that we use, the software we use to put stories together, narrative storytelling, linear storytelling, nonlinear storytelling, and so forth, advances in headset technology, the inclusion of ambisonic audio, video file stitching, and post-production editing workflow using Adobe Premiere. So if what you really want to explore is the production process, stick around. What we look at today in terms of a conceptual understanding of the medium will directly affect what we look at tomorrow in terms of VR production. So everything that we're going to talk about today, even if it is a little bit esoteric, has practical application. Even the more esoteric and academic sounding concepts. For instance, when we briefly look at cognitive processing and spatial presence, while these terms are used for research and understanding the medium and how audiences interact with it, as content creators, it is difficult for us to produce excellent immersive storytelling pieces if we overwhelm our audience, their brains with stimuli to the point they can't sink into the experience or feel like they're really there, which is the whole point of this type of immersive technology. So let's get started. So just a heads up, if at any time you have a question for me, please feel free to put it in the chat window. I know there are a lot of questions and discussions point that will be brought up either now or after we finish throughout the hour, but I'll try to address them as they come in. I've also put my email address up for you, and I'll revisit, giving it to you at the end as well, in case you have any questions or want to ask any follow-ups after we finish today and tomorrow's session. Okay, so with that in mind, let me share my screen with you. I've got a few things I want to kind of look at as we go through the process. All right, so let me move this out of fun with Zoom. Okay, okay, you need to get larger. There we go. Okay. That's a little better. All right. So immersive media, I hope you guys can see this okay. You guys can see it all right? Okay. Is changing everything about how we work, play, and connect. Now, this was something that came out of Facebook Reality Labs in 2020. Facebook, a few years ago, purchased Oculus, which was the world's, I guess, more premier virtual reality headset creators. So they use it for social applications. They use it for gaming, and they use it for 360 videos. There's some people are using it for training purposes. Some people are using it for educational purposes. Now, one of the things they're trying to do is they're trying to advance the world of entertainment, gaming, to visit places or travel virtually, which was incredibly useful during a pandemic when we all got a little stir crazy at home, to socialize and interact with one another in real time in a mediated environment. So one of the most interesting things about 360 VR arrived early on. The language that we use to talk about when we talk about an audience that's actually using it. So when we watch TV, okay, we listen to the radio, we listen to a podcast, we watch a film, we read a book, magazine, or newspaper, we scroll through a website or a social media feed. But in 360 VR, we talk about it. So the word that we kind of use to really talk about audience interaction is experience. So we experience a VR. We have a VR experience, a 360 news experience. Now, one of the reasons that this is a really important separation is that the whole point of creating this type of experience, this type of mediated content, is to put our audiences in the environment in which we are addressing. So we're shooting and creating content to actually, via headset, place our audience inside a news event or a story. And that also, the reason that's really important is with this experiential type media comes a serious considerations about the medium itself and how its audience interacts with it. Okay, so here, via 360 VR, one of the important conceptual definitions between virtual reality and 360-degree storytelling, or what I just simply call 360 VR, is that 360 VR is not animated. It's not computer engineered. It's constructed using spherical camera technology. So you're actually out in the world capturing video content and then processing it to create these VR experiences. Some of the cameras have a series of ultra-wide camera lenses that vary from camera to camera. Some cameras have two lenses that are 220 degrees that overlap with one another. and are stitched together like a shirt at the overlap points. Others have between 8 and 30 lenses that serve the same process, but the more lenses you have, the more complex the stitching process gets, the more computing power it needs to really kind of process that those file sizes. Some shoot in 16K, but the cameras that I work with, the standard consumer grade camera right now that I use are Insta360 1X and 1X2, which are about $400 American each. They shoot in roughly 6K or 5.6K. They have two spherical lenses, wide angle lenses, ultra wide angle lenses that are stitched together at a single point. They're making the stitching process relatively easy. And we'll talk a lot about the process tomorrow. But it's actually a lot more consumer friendly and a lot more journalist friendly and student friendly for that matter than it used to be. 5 years ago, the cost of such a camera was upwards of $1,000, sometimes more. Now, of course, as technology has advanced, the quality has gotten better and the technology itself has become more affordable all around. And the software that we use to process it, I just use Adobe Premiere Pro, which has adapted itself in the last year in order to really kind of handle 360 and spherical video content rather seamlessly, actually. So it's pretty useful stuff. Now, as far as publishing platforms go, 360 VR videos can be published on YouTube or a dedicated news website or any website. Can be uploaded to social media like Facebook and Twitter, and can be downloaded or sideloaded onto Oculus Quest headsets or Quest 2 headsets or Samsung Gear headsets, or even your smartphones paired with Google Cardboard viewers, which are very, very economical. And they take advantage of the devices that you already have. Okay, so let's take an example. We'll take a look at an example really quick. This is actually called The Big Picture. Now, in 2017, a story was put together for representing the Isle de Jean Charles in Louisiana in the United States. It's a long form storytelling, and it was produced specifically for the Hulu virtual reality app. Now, let me pull up this brief introduction here just to take a look at it, and I'll share my screen again. All right, so yeah. Okay, so this right here, what you can see, now again, this is a 2D representation of a spherical 360 video. So while I cannot show you the full sphere, I can kind of give you a feel for how it actually works. So with this is the big picture. The story itself centered on climate change. So reading the synopsis here, some global problems, especially climate change, are better understood when the true scale can be witnessed in 360 degrees. That's why Spherica provided its drone services, complete with its proprietary hardware stabilizing rig, to fully capture the scale of the problem in the Isles de Jean Charles, Louisiana, a place that was lost 98% of its land to flooding and rising sea levels. So one of the things that this organization did for its news story was they really wanted to immerse their audience in this environment so they could see it firsthand, not just look at it on a standard news package or on a television screen, so they could put themselves in a VR headset and sink in to witness firsthand, or at least give the illusion of witnessing firsthand what was going on there. So in order to do this, they actually paired 360 cameras with drones to get aerial shots flying over bayous and flooded areas, flooded out homes and such, to really kind of allow their news audience to really experience what was going on, or at least secondhand experience what was going on there. Okay. So before we actually get into a few more examples and talk specifically about head-mounted displays, there's a couple of different modalities and a couple of different AR, VR definitions we have to look at. So there are a lot of influencing factors when it comes to media technology. This is by no means inclusive, and it doesn't really need to be, but we need to understand what's at the core of what we're talking about today. So with something like 360 video, which has really only been around in its current form for about 5 or 6 years, give or take, and its uses in different contexts are in the very early stages of testing from content creators and research from academics and professionals alike. It's important that we recognize it is indeed emerging in the sense that both technology and content are under development and under experimentation, which is one of the things that really kind of excites me about this technology. Film has been around for 120 years in certain forms. Radio about the same. Television has been around for nearly a century, give or take, and they've had a very, very long time to advance, adapt, and perfect itself, explore, evolve, and so forth. This medium, the 360 VR medium and virtual reality as a whole, is in its infancy. And one of the things that the content creators have struggled with is how to best adopt that medium for different contexts. A news context, a journalism context, a documentary context, a horror movie context, entertainment purposes. How do we actually tell effective stories using these media? So this is done largely through the trial and error that we're working through right now, which is why it is so fascinating to me, because we can actually live this process right now and advance it in certain ways. So in any type of storytelling, the type of message of story affects the modality, affects the medium. Something that's great for radio may not work well in television, and something that's great for television may not work in film, and so forth. Something that's specifically for film may not work well for VR, and so on. So the target audience is also a factor. Right now, VR users are largely first adopters, early adopters, gamers, researchers, university faculty, and students, and people that want to explore and create content for a new medium. All right, so there are a lot of people out there who agree VR is an important and viable new storytelling medium, but before they actually go out of the way to purchase or even put on a head-mounted display is a different story. Diffusion of innovations theory and others largely account for this. We are somewhere between the early and middle stages of acceptance. One of the reasons, the content is not quite there. It's not quite streamlined for a general audience, but it's something that we are exploring and something that we are creating content for gamers, filmmakers, documentarians, journalists, and so forth. So again, attitudes, how people feel about the medium is certainly going to affect whether or not they actually go out and engage with it. Cognition, how we process stimuli, when we're actually inside the headset and we're inside an experience, is it too much? Is it too little? Is the pacing too quick for us to really comprehend and understand? Because again, this is not a select frame, this is a fully immersive thing. So if you don't necessarily plan from a content creator's perspective for what's behind you, what's to the left, for the audio, for the lighting and so forth, it's going to affect whether or not people actually can actively process the information necessary. And in a journalism context, processing information is everything. So we're not effectively getting across pieces of information to our audiences. We're failing at our jobs. So understanding how to effectively do this is something that we really have to work on in the future with this technology. Okay, so looking at different types of immersive technology. So we have augmented reality, AR, mixed reality, MR, virtual reality, VR, and then 360 degree virtual reality, which I just call 360 VR. Now, on the cinematic or the filmmaker side of things, I have a colleague over at Ohio University who has been working this for much longer than I have. He refers to it as cinematic via virtual reality, or CineVR, and rightly so. So for journalistic purposes, this is actually what I refer to it, but there is a little argument in the field what we actually call this stuff. All right, so let's look at a spectrum here. So augmented reality actually superimposes pieces of information, pieces of digital media on top of the world around you. So if you look over here in the corner, you've got, it is less immersive. It does take into context your surroundings. And like, for instance, over here, and then we've got a train here, and we have the word express over it with some information about likely travel, where it's going, various stops coming up, and so forth. If any of you have seen the Marvel cinematic universe at all, Iron Man's suit, where he has pieces of information superimposed over the real world, that's a good example, well, fictional example of AR. Mixed reality, or MR, is when we actually take digital objects and superimpose them into your surroundings. This you can get in terms of, I think one of the biggest, actually it's not that big, it's, well, Microsoft HoloLens. It's something that does this pretty effectively. Now, they actually take digital objects, whatever it may be. In the gaming environment, you can take Pokemon, you can take dolphins, you can take Star Wars characters, and then just put them in your living room, and they can actually interact with some of the objects in your room, which is pretty fascinating. 360 virtual reality is what we're going to be dealing with here, where you actually capture cinematic VR with a camera and then process it for a head-mounted display. And then virtual reality is where the computer animation comes in, the gaming comes in. So it's a world that is created through computer graphics and gaming engines. And one of the huge differences between 360 and VR is that in CGI VR, in gaming VR, in virtually created environments, you can actually interact with the objects in the room. So instead of a 360 video where I showcase my office, or in this case, my digital background, I can't actually interact with that. I can't reach out and pick up that clock and then move it to a different part of the room. But in a gaming environment or fully a CG VR environment, I can actually pick that up and move from one side to the other, interact with it on a different level. However, it is all animated, it's all computer animated, and that kind of disconnects a little bit with what we're talking about as far as 360 video goes. Okay, so the crux of the matter is this. With these different modalities, immersive media is a growing industry, no matter where your interest lies. If your interest is in journalism and news, there's an application for it, and people are using it right now to actually do that. If your interest is in gaming, of course, that's coming out pretty large in the arena too. It's very transformative. It's very disruptive media, and it's something that we're going to see over the next 5 or 10 years as content gets better more and more, and the cost of headsets actually becomes less expensive. More and more people are likely to adopt it and then see it kind of take off in a very real way. Okay. So specifically the 360 VR and virtual reality news. So these are some standard headsets that we look at. This is an Oculus Go. It's a few years old now. This is a Google Cardboard. The reason I bring this up is because and there was an initiative when the New York Times first produced its daily 360 series, where they produced a VR video every day for a year. One of the things they did to get their subscribers interested in it is they actually mailed out Google Cardboard headsets to all their subscribers so they can slide their phones into them and then use them to view their content. It was a pretty successful marketing tool, actually. Over here, you have a Samsung Gear, which also pairs with your smartphone if you have a Samsung phone. That allows you to view things relatively inexpensively. You can probably get one of those now for about $20. Okay. So one of the interesting things about this technology from a journalist perspective is that it actually allows you to put your audience into a specific location at a news event. So I like this quote. I actually, I stole this from like dissertation advisors, Hans Meyer, he used it in a presentation. Journalism and location. We live at a time and in a world in which people can become so glued to their gadgets, they forget the place where they're standing. But a reporter equipped with the right geospatial devices has a unique opportunity to reconnect people to place. So in my doctoral dissertation, one of the things I did was look at the effects of space and place on community journalism. So producing local stories for a local news environments where I take VR content that I created in the environments they're already familiar with and then place them in a news event or a news story inside a headset. And one of the things that I found was that the perception of journalistic credibility was off the charts. We actually hit a ceiling effect in both of my experiments to where whether or not they were affected by some of the other elements that I was studying at the time, the journalist credibility, this perception of stuff was off the charts in terms of how they perceived the accuracy and quality of the information. So virtual reality news carries the capacity to actually place its new audience in a location where the story is taking place, and nothing else has really come close yet. Okay, so one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute, as far as when we talk about the production elements of this, is that one of the things that we give up as content creators, especially if you're really used to television or film, is that we give up selective framing. Now, I've seen film directors, even at the student level, pour over a single shot. Have to get the frame just right. The lighting has to be right. The angle has to be right. The distance has to be just right. But with this, we're actually giving that up. There's no way we can actually selectively frame a single item or a single scene. Now, 360 shoots in all directions at all times, and there is actually no off camera. Now, one of the issues that content creators have with this is, well, where do you hire the crew? Where do you stash the sets? If you need to bring in external lighting for an interview, how do you operate under that? If you're trying to highlight a specific event in the scene, and you can't actually go in for a close-up, how do you work with these things in this medium? And the answer is we're still figuring a lot of that out. Now, some of that we do actually with sound. For instance, if you are operating in a news environment and you have a sound capture that's off to the back and the left, and you highlight that sound, one that indicates for your viewer who can hear it in the headset to turn around and see what's behind them. So that's when we actually direct attention. Okay, so with this, there's a different modality. The audience itself is not a passive receiver of information. They are active. They're no longer tethered to a single frame. They have the ability to manipulate the story in some fashion, even if it's as simple as turning around and looking over here. So journalists are beginning to shoot stories in 360, and of particular interest is the level of immersion that we have with that. But with that trade-off, comes the audience actually being able to not focus on whatever it is you want them to focus on, which is a significant challenge when it comes to this sort of thing. Okay, so one of the things I do want to show you, I'm going to click off this link real quick, is the New York Times. I mentioned before, the Daily 360 initiative. They stopped it in 2018 when the initiative was complete, but they put together a series of videos specifically in Shot 360 for this. Now, they tried a couple of different ways to tell the story. Here you can see the embedded text right here. The ebb tide empties the water under the ice, creating an ice cave for an hour or more. Now, one of the things that I found particularly troubling about trying to experience the New York Times Daily 360, at least the early videos on in the headset, was that their egregious, or their use of text to tell the story to advance their narratives was really problematic for the overall experience. Because while I want to sink into the environment and sink into the video and explore, I'm constantly focusing my attention on the text. So I have to pull myself out of the actual experience to read the news story that they're presenting. And one of the ways that we get around this, and we'll talk about this in depth tomorrow, is through voiceover. Instead of actually trying to embed text, you're using the a different sense, using the audio to advance your story. And what that does is actually allow us to focus our attention on the visual environment that we're being presented with, and not have to break out of that sinking feeling and not with that break out of our sense of presence to advance the story itself. So I'm going to post this link up here as well. So this is the New York Times Daily 360 initiative. And if any of you want to check this out on your own time, there are roughly 400 videos here to go through. They're all about 2 minutes long, between 2 and 5 minutes long. They all tell a specific story in a specific place. And the purpose is to take your audience and then place them in a news environment that they may not otherwise experience on their own. But one of the things I do want to kind of hit on with this is that it's a good example of what I was talking about earlier on, whenever the Daily 360 and the New York Times and the journalists that were trying to tell stories specifically using embedded text. They weren't quite sure how to get the story across while still showcasing the visual environment. So they went with text. And as you see, one of the hardest things that I had to do when I was going through that was I really wanted to focus my attention on the people in the story, the subjects that were down there. They were digging out clams. The environment itself was actually quite beautiful. Everything covered in ice in an underground ice cave that would fill up with water very quickly. And these people's stories that they're going down there within a very, very truncated period of time to actually, gather some mussels and then come back up and feast. But every time you saw a piece of text, you actually had to stop and then find it, locate it, center on it, read it. And by the time you actually got through that process, the story had changed, the scene had changed. You had to reevaluate where you were and reevaluate what you were seeing, and then process the scene change in your head, which is one of the things I was talking about in terms of cognitive ability. Every time there's a scene change, our brain has to remap the environment, which does kind of take us out a little bit. So the scene was cut together very, very quickly. It was a short 2 minutes. but as an early use of how journalists were using this to tell, short stories, this is a good example of that. Now, one of the interesting things about the Daily 360 that I find fascinating, and they're all published both on their own website and on YouTube. You can actually look at they're in chronological order. You can actually look at the evolution of how they're telling stories from where they started to where they ended up. Eventually, they got rid of the embedded text and went with voiceovers, and then eventually they also they let the subjects tell their stories for themselves. So instead of a narrator or a journalist narrating, you actually had interview pieces that featured the subjects in the stories that were telling their own stories as they were going about inside a news environment, which I thought was a pretty good use of the medium. It allowed us to really kind of sink in a little cleaner, a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more effectively. All right, so let me. I'm sure over the last year we all got really good at, or somewhat good at, working with Zoom and its screen share capabilities. Okay, so here's some considerations specifically for head-mounted displays when we're putting together this type of content. First off, when I talk about head-mounted displays, I'm talking, the abbreviation is HMDs. So this is where we are for this session. We're characterized by fully immersive cinematic video and spatialized ambisonic sound. Now, ambisonic sound, it's essentially the same thing as far as the video content goes. It operates in a sphere. You have a specialized ambisonic microphone that captures sound above, below, and essentially in all directions, and stitched together to the video. So that way, when you're inside the headset and you change perspectives, the sound actually changes with you. So instead of having stereo left or right or 5.1 or 7.1 sound where you break out and you dedicate a certain sound at a certain volume level in a specific speaker around you, this is set in a sphere. So if you actually have a sound behind you back to the left and you're looking over in this direction, you will hear it as if it was naturally behind you. So one of the cues that we use in this type of thing to address people's attention and capture their attention or let them know that there's something in a different direction that they maybe not be focusing on is audio. So this is what we call 6 degrees of interactivity. So we're not talking about full immersion where you can actually, remember when we were talking about with computer animated VR where you can actually move objects around. This, you're able to move inside of this environment, but you are stationary to where the camera, you're subject to where the camera is placed. You are stationary and you can't actually pick up an object and then move it. So instead of having 12 degrees of interactivity, you've got 6, which is still pretty effective. But you cannot interact with, say, a political protester. If you were to take a video of a protest and then put somebody inside a headset, they can't actually reach out and touch that person. However, in the gaming environment, using a controller, you would be able to do that. Okay, so this is also a nice little quote. The thing that a lot of storytellers haven't realized just yet is that 360 is just a tool. It's just another camera. It's a really useful camera, a super flexible camera, but a camera. There still has to be a story there, and there still has to be variety, angles, and voices, and people. So immersion is a concept that we've talked about before. Spatial presence is what we're talking about as far as we're sinking into an environment. Social presence is something we haven't quite touched on yet, but it's the interactive element between you and the characters around you. So, for instance, if you're sinking into a news story and you're in a crowd of people, social presence is where you actually kind of feel like these people, you're interacting with these people on some level. Interactivity and control in terms of how the audience interacts and controls the experience themselves. Spatial embodiment, feeling like you're actually present as a part of the experience. And then the audience exerting control over the experience. All right. So Spatial presence is that feeling of being there. It's a psychological concept. It's a cognitive concept. Your mind actually gets rid of the real world and replaces it in favor of the mediated world. Now, that's one of the reasons I really like these headsets, these head-mounted displays, because they do block out everything around you. Like right now, when I am in my office, in a library, I'm speaking into a camera. I can see the wall behind it. I can see the photos and images I have here. And the real world, the physical world around me is not actually being replaced by the Zoom environment. However, in the head-mounted displays with 360 video and virtual reality, the virtual environment is actually replacing the real world. So when I look forward, I don't see my camera, I actually see the virtual environment. And this has an effect on how I actually perceive that environment. It's not an instant process. It's something you actually have to sink into. So when I put on the headset, I'm still conscious of the headset, but after a few minutes, I may actually lose track of my physical environment in favor of the mediated environment. That's what we're talking about when we talk about presence. Now, people often conflate immersion and presence. Immersion is technological. So you have an immersive medium, IMAX film, or IMAX movies are an immersive medium. A really good book with a strong narrative that you kind of sink into can be an immersive medium. Head-mounted displays are designed to be immersive, so they are an immersive medium. But the sense of presence that you feel inside a VR experience is a separate but linked concept. Okay, social presence is being there with others. So on-screen characters, digital avatars, the illusion of social interaction. For instance, a 360 VR political protest. One of the first ones that I saw that somebody had shot, I think it was also for the Daily 360 New York Times, in a headset, was one of the political protests in Washington, D.C., USA. The camera operator was marching along with a group of others. And the longer I was there, the longer I actually was aware of the other characters that I was given the illusion of marching with. So you're there, you're watching everything unfold around you, not from a couch at home. So that allows you to at least give the illusion of interacting with some of the other characters on screen or in the headset. Now, interactivity and control, even something as simple as turning your head from side to side in order to see something from a different perspective, has an effect on how our brains process the content. So again, you're just slightly turned to this direction to see what's over here inside the mediated environment. And that, just as simple as that, affects the way we actually see it. And it does actually sort of facilitate this idea of feeling present in those different types of environments. Okay, so one of the questions I do have for everybody, and this is something that that we are going to need to address as content creators, is this a good tool for the job? Now, when we're telling stories, it's important that we have a consistent narrative, something that we can, information that we can give in a cohesive fashion. Using 360 video is not something that every story needs. It's not something that a standard story that can be told more effectively in another medium, should use. So somebody trying to put together something that would be better in a text-based story or be more effective in a video package should not be shot in 360 because it's kind of a waste of a medium. So one of the things, if you guys have the opportunities to do, is take a look at some of these New York Times pieces, take a look at some of the news stories that you yourselves may be producing, and ask yourself, if it would be better, more efficient, more effective as a storytelling mechanism when using these spherical 360 videos, because not every experience will feel that way. For instance, if there's action only on one corner of a piece, like for instance, if you have a face-to-face interview with somebody, and the environment is not important to the story, the surroundings are not important to the story, and you put somebody in that environment, in those surroundings, that may not be the most effective way to tell that story. So some of the things we do need to consider are, is this something that is it an effective use of the story, or is it a wasted opportunity for better storytelling with a different medium? All right, so one of the other things that really kind of terrifies journalists and content creators, but really actually kind of, it works in filmmaking as well, the lack of control they have over framing. I know I mentioned this a couple of times before, but it's really, really, really important as far as this concept goes. journalists, filmmakers, content creators of all kinds, social media content creators, anybody with a standard camera, they have control over where they're pointing the lens. You know, they can tightly frame something, they can do it, they can zoom in on somebody's face. Filmmakers can actually pour into somebody's eyes alone just to get an effective creative attention or create an effective emotional response or generate a response from an audience. Now with this type of technology, with 360 technology, that's not something we can really do yet. So we are relinquishing an element of control over framing, perspective, viewer direction. With you're giving that up to your audience. You're allowing your audience to kind of move around with that. Now, one of the things I want you guys to think about is just, what do you think about that? Giving your audience control over the perspective of your story. It's something that's really kind of compelling. I mean, it's something that I've been struggling with a whole lot over the past couple of years, is relinquishing that control. Because on one hand, we do allow we are putting them in an environment where we're allowing them to experience it in a way they cannot experience it in any other medium. But at the same time, we are giving up that sense of control. We can't really highlight specific things. We can't frame things the way we would otherwise do. And so it's just something within the medium that we have to think about and conceptualize on a slightly different level. Okay, so actually I want to show you another experience that USA Today put together over the course of 2018. They actually won a Pulitzer Prize for this reporting, and it's fascinating the way they put this together. So it's not only an example of excellent journalism, an example of unique possibilities inherent to digital storytelling from a design perspective. Scores of reporters, photographers, editors, digital developers from across the USA Today network spent 9 months working on this piece. It's called The Wall: Unknown Stories, Unintended Consequences, a report that examines the US-Mexico border in the ways that we have never seen heretofore as far as journalistic content goes. Okay, so they use helicopters and drones to fly the entire length of the border. More than 30 reporters and photographers interviewed migrants, farmers, families, tribal members, even a human smuggler. They joined Border Patrol agents on the ground, at sea, in a tunnel. They patrolled with vigilantes. They walked the borderline with ranchers and landowners that bumped up against it. They were presented with this information in stories, documentaries, an interactive map, and virtual reality experience. The whole thing, if you view this inside an Oculus headset, you can experience this interactively and fully immersively. So the goal of this was to let its audience experience the border in any way they choose. So as discussions placed and decisions were made, the audience member has all the information they need, much more so if they were just kind of reading it. So I'm going to open this hyperlink as well, and then show you guys a little bit about this content. Now, again, it's a 2D representation of a 360 or virtual reality headset, so it's difficult to show, but let's give it a shot anyway. Okay, and I'll pop this link in the Zoom meeting, so you guys can also check it out whenever you, if you want to do it on your own, but just in case the thing doesn't quite come through. Okay. So this is the general website of the piece. Now, if you were in the headset going to this homepage, it would be wrapped around you. But as is, we can kind of scroll down and take a look at it. And there is audio involved. Now, each one of these strips you see, they are video, and they will actually play in real time on the homepage. So it's essentially what they call a 2,000-mile search for answers. And you've got a lot of the political rhetoric that we saw in the United States in 2016. And then as the wall was being built, a lot of investigative reporters went down there to see exactly what was going on. You've got human smugglers, you've got migrant families that are trying to come over the border and so forth. But with this experience, you've got 6 different ways to explore it. And even when you're inside the headset, all these experiences work together. You've got podcasts, you've got audio only interviews, people telling their own stories. You've got virtual reality, which I'm going to click on. So one of the things about this that I really got, was two of the journalists that worked on this piece actually came to Ohio University after it was published. And I had a discussion with them about it, and the amount of work that they put into this, conceptualizing from the ground up a holistic, multifaceted, multimedia virtual reality experience was just mind-blowing. A whole team put this together, and I got to experience it inside the HTC Vive headset firsthand, and some of the ways they constructed the stories was intense. Now, there are some linear stories in there, so there's a clear beginning, there's a clear middle, and a clear conclusion. But at the same time, the way they spaced it out over the experience really allowed the audience member to take control over how they interacted with it. You kind of saw a little bit of a preview of somebody kind of moving objects around or kind of getting closer to an area. So what they did is they built 360 video inside a gaming engine, and then brought in other aspects to it to create a really, really virtual reality experience. They paired CG, 2D photos, videos, audio, and 360 video into this environment to really allow you to move around inside it. Now, if you have the opportunity to check this one out, even if you have a smartphone with a little bit of a controller on it, I really recommend you do it. Spend about 30 minutes with it because it is intense. And as far as an experience goes, it's a very, very good representation of how journalists and content creators are exploring the technology itself. So beyond the story, the technology itself and how they're using it to tell this story is groundbreaking. And that's one of the reasons it won the Pulitzer Prize. Okay, there's one more story I want to let you guys check out on your own, and I'm going to open this link and then put it in there as well if you guys want to check it out. It's something from Canadian filmmakers, Felix and Paul Studios. Now, this was done as a documentary piece. It is rooted in journalism, but it has a lot, it pairs journalism, research, interviews, with the cinematic experience. So you have filmmakers putting together a nonfiction story, and they did it in a truly spectacular way. This piece is actually called Traveling While Black. It was an official selection of the Sundance Film Festival, and it went on to other film festivals. I actually think it went to Cannes as well, but yeah, I have to look that up just to be sure. But it's staggering the way they put this, they constructed this story together. So I'm going to play a 40-second preview of what this is. The whole experience is about 20 minutes long, and it, unlike the USA Today piece, is an example of a linear story. There's a clear start, a clear middle, and a clear finish. But as you're going through it, you're placed in several different environments that you can interact with. Now, one of the things I want to point out to you that I thought was an incredibly clever use of the environment for this documentary piece, and I don't know if you all could catch it, the Ben's Chili Bowl is a famous restaurant in Washington, D.C. You can kind of see right here where it says it's a Washington landmark. It's true, it is. So this is where the primary interviews were shot. And it was, slightly staged. Of course, you have a very old car over here and the street is clear one night. So in this environment, you've got a lot of dark space. When you're sitting here, you're actually sitting at the counter. And through different parts of this documentary, you have the speakers here whose voices you hear sitting on the stools next to you. So you can actually turn next to them and interact with them. What we were talking about as far as social presence goes. You sink into the environment, you're sitting there at the diner. The camera placement is placed in different locations. One where it's placed right here, at one point in the experience where you're sitting at the counter with this person who's speaking to you. And over here, of course, this is just kind of a showcase of the environment itself. But over here, we have historical footage. So you have 2D historical footage that was captured a long time ago, and they're using the dark space and then in different parts with the reflective glass of this environment as a theater projection. So as you're going through there and you have a lot of empty space in the 360 environment, they're utilizing this space to better tell the story, which I thought was a very, very clever use. So I highly recommend you guys checking that out. Even I was able to view it on my phone I was able to pull it up using that link and just kind of, check it out that way, which it is a fascinating piece. But so this is an example of an immersive interactive 360 VR documentary film. The quality of video, the edits, the special effects are stunning. The director got very creative with its integration of 360 video, standard audio, voiceover narration, and embedded use of historical newsreel footage in strategic places around the environments to tell that story. It received an Emmy Award nomination for Outstanding Interactive Program at the 71st Primetime Creative Arts Emmy Awards in 2019, and then a Canadian Screen Award for Best Immersive Experience at the 8th Canadian Screen Awards in 2020. So with this, I really just wanted to showcase the possibilities of the medium. So basically, this today's session this is a foundation of what the medium is. This is how it differs from film, from digital media, from TikTok videos, from standard websites, how we actually process it as an audience, some of the things we need to take into consideration as content creators, as journalists, as filmmakers, as documentarians, as we consider how our audiences interact with it. And then some of the different ways modern storytellers are using now to really capitalize on this new medium, experiment with it in different ways, with different types of storytelling, to really kind of immerse their audiences in these environments. So in order to really tell an effective VR story, you can't just pop a camera in a place, turn it on, and expect it to take care of itself. Several considerations have to be made in terms of the production process, camera placement, audio considerations, video considerations, environmental considerations, whether or not the 360 is the right story, the right medium to use to tell a story. So one of the things that we love to do with emerging media, and this is something that I constantly have to warn my students about, is that you give them a tool, you give them a camera, which, like I said earlier, pull that quote, it's just another tool. They want to use it for everything. So if I'm trying to change the oil in my car, I'm not going to use a hammer. I'm going to use the right tool for the job. Now, the right tool for your story may not be 360. So don't do I'm not trying to sell you guys on using this for everything, because it's just not the case. It is, if you conceptualize a story specifically for 360 and then shoot in an environment that is conducive to using this, and then shoot it for the head-mounted display to where you can really let your audience sing into it. For journalists, it's a great way to actually go about telling a story, or can be at least. For filmmakers, it's a way to engage your audiences in ways that you have never been able to do so before. But to do so requires a lot of considerations for things that we otherwise wouldn't necessarily think about. One of the hardest things I did when I was first learning how to use 360 was I was shooting an interview with somebody. I was not part of the story. And I was trying to conduct the interview at the same time. And they're using the 360 camera, there's no way for me to not be in the frame. So I was struggling with how I actually shoot an interview with journalistic intents without being a part of the piece. So I had to get a little bit clever with it. For example, I was sitting down in a restaurant with an interview subject, and there was a column. It was about a 12 by 12 column in the middle of the restaurant so that a table was sitting next to. So I chose to place the camera in the seat across from her at the table, and then I conducted the interview from around the corner. So if you look very carefully in the shot, you can actually see the tip of my knee as it's sticking out from around the corner. But I'm actually having an interview conversation with this subject I'm in the environment, but I'm hiding in a way that I'm not on camera. So that way I don't distract from the visual environment. Now, tomorrow, when we actually look at documentary storytelling and different ways to actually put together those types of pieces, there's one in particular that I shot in Athens, Ohio, on Appalachian storytelling, old time music, which is traditional Appalachian music in the Appalachian region of the United States, as well as its tradition of brewing farmhouse ales in a local brewery. So I conducted several interviews for that. And each scene that you see inside that VR experience, I and my crew, because I had to use a crew for that. I had an audio crew, a camera crew, and a computer crew, and we were all hiding in each shot. And one of the fun things that I like to do when I have people viewing it is kind of point out where we all are. Like there's one shot where you can actually see one of my camera operators, the tips of her shoes pointing out from behind a giant beer vat. And there's an old refrigerator off to the side that I'm actually standing inside. It was a little cold there, but while conducting the interview, so that way, again, I wouldn't be in the shot. I wouldn't be a distraction. So these are different ways that we were trying to come up with like the actual production of it. So tomorrow, when we get into the session, we will go in depth into camera technology, editing software, and shooting techniques. So I don't know if my time is up. I thought I had about an hour, give or take, but really that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. So this is where we're at with the medium. This is the possibility for the potential of the medium. And it's actually quite user-friendly and cost-efficient right now. So I'm actually going to drop my Zoom background for a second and show you the bookshelf behind me. Oh, wait, background, virtual background, none. Got really bright. Okay. But anyway, the reason I'm doing that is this camera right here, this is an Insta360 One X2. Now I got this, it was released, I think in November, but it was delivered to me right around the same time. It's a very, very efficient device. It's very user-friendly. You've got two 220-degree lenses on either side, and a display right here that actually projects the video that you're seeing, and you can kind of move around inside it. But one of the reasons I like this, it's waterproof. I actually had some of my students drop it into a frozen lake in February for an ice fishing piece. So they went out with a group of people who were actually on a lake doing some ice fishing, and they went inside the ice fishing tent and shot the interview there, and then actually dropped it underneath the water to get a view as well as we could. It wasn't lit very well, but the shot was actually pretty effective. But it is waterproof up to a certain number of, it's actually pretty durable. And this thing costs maybe, I think, $400. So in terms of buying a DSLR or buying a new lens or buying, a really solid film camera, it's not that expensive. And this Oculus headset that I keep talking about a couple of years ago, we're talking between like $600 and $1,000, and you have to have a dedicated computer to use it. This Oculus Quest headset ran about $200 new, and so I bought several of them for my students. So it's not something that is cost prohibitive, at least as it was a couple of years ago. So these are, as the technology is becoming more efficient and more effective, it's also becoming less expensive, and so we're able to really kind of get it. Because inevitably, one of the first, anytime I have this discussion, journalists are often like, well, we don't really need that, and we would rather use our resources elsewhere because it's too expensive, and we just don't want to deal with it. But if you have the right story, if you have a good story, a compelling story, and you have this, an understanding of this technology, you can put together a really, really good narrative. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns or anything like along those lines, please feel free to use the chat. I am monitoring the window. If you guys have anything you want to ask about any of this stuff, about the technology, about the stories, about some of the examples I showed, pop them in there, and I've got a little bit of time so we can actually talk about it. So one of the things I really love doing is initiating discussion with people about stuff like this, because I can talk about this stuff all day. But at the same time, how people are interacting with it, or how people are, just whether or not they, think it's a good idea at all, for that matter. I really want to know, and I'm really quite curious as to what you think about the medium in general. Because one of the things that we're doing as content creators, as journalists, as filmmakers moving forward, is not only conceptualizing how to best use the medium, but how best to engage an audience that may not care all that much about it. So if I show you a VR story, you may look at it and say, okay, that's great, but who cares? But at the same time, if we develop an understanding or answer a few questions about it, we may be able to more effectively have those conversations. So I have one last thing I want to mention. This is a shout out to one of my colleagues at Ohio University who's doing some really good work on a project that she used 360 video for. So I can pop that up right quick. It's called The Last Tropical Glaciers. Now, I wish she was here to talk about this today because she is much better at this than I am. But one of the things that she did was the whole purpose of the project is to go around to countries and places in the world that used to be rife with tropical glaciers. So, the mountaintops in Colombia, East Africa in 2021 is something that they're going to be doing this year. That were once covered in snow and covered in glaciers and that have receded. So what they're doing is taking drone video and 360 video to tell a long form story on an interactive website and an Oculus headset, showcasing the science behind climate change, improving climate literacy using this technology, again, to put people in these places. And as a secondary intent, from a documentary perspective, as these glaciers are melting, these environments will no longer exist. So capturing them in 360 video for headsets allows us to experience something that may actually not be there in a couple of years. So it's a really unique thing. So with this, I'm scrolling through this website. They actually have several different things in here. They've got their virtual reality things. You can kind of click on and interact with within the website. Learn by living it is their creed. So education cannot and should not be any different from real life experiences. The main goal of VR 360 experience is to educate the youth age 18-24 on climate change and tropical glaciers while offering the young generation a chance to virtually travel and be immersed in these environments no matter who they are and no matter where they are. So their primary purpose is to have them live it and experience it and learn about it, while at the same time offering accessibility and equality for those who cannot travel. I will never be, well, I doubt I will ever be able to travel to this point in this place in this country and experience these tropical glaciers. However, with this technology, we can actually use that to immerse ourselves in these environments. For informational purposes, as far as journalism goes, for educational purposes, as far as science and technology go, and it's really kind of fascinating how people are using this stuff for these reasons. But okay, if there are no questions, I will go ahead and kind of wrap up a little bit. But yeah, seriously, if you guys want to, if you have anything you want to type out, or just please feel free to do so in the chat box to the left. I also included my email address, and I'll type it again here for you, my name and contact information.
Oh, well, sir, there are a few questions that I would want to ask. I mean, there are a lot of participants who are asking a lot of questions, and some of the questions are falling in the category of the information that you shared today, and some questions are probably falling in the category of information and knowledge that you'll be sharing tomorrow. So there's one question by one of the participants who says that in the context of news and journalism, a country like India, with its challenges, is facing acute problems with respect to the revenue and getting to make people pay for consuming the news content. So how can a concept like this, that from the outset appears to be expensive, fit in the Indian context?
Yeah.
I think this is because the environment, the ecosystem with respect to the journalism is very different from what it is with respect to the entertainment. So in terms of entertainment, people want to spend, but in terms of news consumption, I think that is not the case. So what are your views on this?
So this is something that I've been struggling with for the past couple of years here. So that's actually a very, very good question. I thank you for it. Being able to get people interested and engaged with the technology. It's, you're absolutely right. If the, from an entertainment perspective, people are much more motivated to pursue technology for the purposes of self-gratification, for entertainment, to sort of distance themselves from the real world, for escapism purposes. And news and journalism is not that. It does not. It's used an informational purpose. Now, I don't see this as a money maker on its own, at least not yet. I see this personally as just, like we talked about earlier, as just another tool, as another storytelling mechanism to supplement existing mechanisms. So look, if you're a local news site in a rural area and you have a website, you can actually create this type of content and then publish it on YouTube for free, and then link that content to your website. So it only feels cost prohibitive in terms of the startup cost. And the startup cost, really, all you need is the camera, which again will run you about $400, a website or YouTube channel, which are essentially free or at low cost, or no additional cost to you, or no additional cost to a news organization, and the software to edit it. Now, the software to edit it actually comes free with the camera. So as far as startup costs go, you're looking at maybe, let's see, $400 to actually produce one of these things. And the headsets are, from an audience perspective, is a little bit different. Now it's very niche, and getting that going is going to be a few years out. Now, actually, I'm glad you brought up entertainment. So one of the reasons that my students felt comfortable getting these headsets for the classes that I'm teaching is that they're not just for news. Like, for example, I have, one of the first things I did was publish, or not to load, a series of game environments on them. I think Star Wars had a couple of virtual reality games where you're fighting Sith Lords and Darth Vader and whatnot. It was a lot of fun. And Beat Saber, which is a music game where you're kind of you're playing music, you're dodging objects as they're coming at you to a specific rhythm. There are some first-person shooter games, some race car games, and so forth. On top of all of that, I put in news apps. So on one hand, they're using the headset for entertainment purposes. If they want to look at the most recent film, if they want to look at the most recent game, they can do that inside this headset. And then at the same time they're actually in there, they can supplement their entertainment with news content. And I'm not saying they will. I mean, they have to actually be motivated to go out there and engage with it. And that is a few years off. Our first adopters, the people who really like new technology, they are already on it now. And then that is a small niche. But as the technology again becomes more effective, more efficient, and more user friendly, we can see a larger audience. And then I can see journalists all over the place really kind of see the value in it a little bit more in terms of creating that type of content. So with these, like for instance, our smartphones, I use it to communicate with other people. But that's realistically, that's a very small amount of time that I'm spending with my phone. I'm on it for news. I'm on it for entertainment. I'm on it for YouTube videos. I'm on it for music as I drive or as I work out or exercise. I use it for gaming. I actually have several different games on here to pass the time with. One of my favorite apps is just a little chess app that I use to play with people all over the world. And while I'm doing these things, I will, of course, I'm motivated as a journalist, but while I'm doing these things, I'll also look up the Associated Press news website, the New York Times website, my local news website here. So my primary use for this technology is not news, but I also use it to engage with news content because that content is there. And as content creators, if we are not actually creating the contents for this medium, no one's ever going to see it. No one will ever feel motivated to actually pick up these devices or spend the money on it as a general audience. But if they buy it for a different purpose and we have that content there for them, they may experience it differently. They may perceive the technology a little bit differently and be maybe more likely to engage with that type of news content. Again, that's years down the road. As an emerging medium, one of the struggles that we get is we don't really know where this stuff is going. We don't know how effective or how efficient it will be moving forward. However, looking at the recent trends, then like when Facebook dropped its Oculus Quest 2 headsets, I think it was about 6 months ago, They sold more than 2 million units all over the world in the short space of a few months. Previously, when they came up with the first Oculus Quest headset, they sold maybe 500,000. And before that, with the Oculus Go, they sold maybe, let's say, 700,000. So I'm not making these numbers up, but except for the 2 million number, that actually happened. But they didn't sell a lot of the early iterations of them. But as the interest grew, when they came up with the most recent headset, there was a consumer base for it. So we're kind of seeing that evolution as it advances. But it's not a quick process. And if you're looking for something with an emerging medium that's sort of here and now, that has a vast audience in this moment, this is not that. But as we develop the content, as we develop it for journalism, as we develop it for this type of storytelling, and as the technology advances in the next few years or over the next decade, we will see that audience grow. But in order for that audience to grow, the content has to be there. And that's kind of the nexus that we're struggling with right now as content creators, as journalists. We know the medium exists, we know it's there, we know we can use it. But even if we like USA Today poured a lot of resources into their wall piece, a lot of resources into their wall piece over an extended period of time. And the result was stunning. The piece as a whole was spectacular and very informative and very, very, very excellent journalism. But the number of people that are actually engaging with it inside the headset as opposed to the website are a small portion of the audience. But the content was so good that I and several others went out of our way to check it out in that immersive environment because it was so expertly crafted, because the content was there. And it was, yeah, it's back to the question. It is something that we are struggling with, and as an immersive, and not necessarily struggling in a bad way, but we're trying to evolve the content to grasp that audience. And once that audience is there, creating this type of content will be much more accessible, and it should be perceived as a norm as opposed to an anomaly.
Okay, sir, now because you took us through a very mesmerizing visual journey through, the various things that you shared on your screen. I mean, it has brought some questions from one of our faculty member, Sumantra Sarthi Das. And there's another question that is related to the technology itself. It says, how do one go about lighting the set while working with the Cine 360 VR, as we have lighting equipment all around? At the same time, lenses are also there. And, a kind of related question that says, how would you create a center of focus in 360-degree videos? Now, since it is part of what you'll probably be teaching tomorrow. So, I mean, if you would want to just give us a teaser so that,
Sure.
People go back with some food for thought.
So lighting, when I first came across the lighting issue when I was producing the journalistic documentary for the Appalachian music and farmhouse sales microbrews. We shot inside a brewery and it was very dark in there. And we had, and the lighting they had in there was not sufficient to light the scene. And we had to go out there and shoot that 2 or 3 times to really, we shot it once thinking we would see something. And when we put it on the headset, I mean, it was dreadful. It just didn't work. So we went back another day and we tried to bring in additional lighting and just have them visible inside the scene, and that also didn't work. And the lights were actually very distracting. So our solution that did not violate any journalistic ethical norms, we actually integrated the lighting into the environment. So this is something that I can show you guys tomorrow, that I intend to show you guys tomorrow, but we can look, there's a scene that I shot inside this brewery where I can actually point out exactly where I stashed my lights. They're visible in the scene. They're not being hidden. They're not being edited out. They're not being scratched in post-production. But for instance, I took a series of LED panels and I put lighting diffusers on the outside of them. And I set them next to stacked kegs. So the stacked kegs, the faces of them are actually round. The lighting diffuser is round. And when they're next to each other, you really have to look closely to see that the lighting is not actually a part of the set. And there are some spots underneath the bar, the one where we're speaking with one of our subjects, and the lights are actually stashed behind the bar, lighting the subject. So we made clever use of our environments to bring in additional lighting for the scene. And that is an ongoing challenge that we had. But we, as a journalist, the integrity of our shots matter. We can't go into post-production and manipulate the images in ways that misrepresent the scene. So getting clever about how we actually go about showcasing those pieces is something that we are going to talk about a lot tomorrow, in fact. But no, it's definitely something that we were challenged with and that we struggled with. The best piece of advice I can give you, make best use of natural lighting as you can. Every time we had the option to shoot outside in sunlight conditions, we did, because that natural light was so good. And it looks very, very good in the headset, very good on camera. But when you're inside and you don't have a lot of natural light, and the fluorescent lights that are inside are difficult or challenging, you've got to come up with interesting and clever ways to actually light the scene without distracting your audience. So I'll show you guys a demo of that tomorrow. I'll show you specifically where we hid those lights and where we stashed them and how we used it to light the scene. It actually turned out to be pretty effective. And that was a few years ago. And we've learned a lot since then as well, in terms of what we can and cannot do, or that what works and what doesn't work. So all of this is trial and error that's happening right now. So yeah, the lighting issue was very much an issue that we struggled with inside at first, but we found a couple of ways around it that didn't violate any ethical norms.
Fine.
The second part of that question?
Yeah, that's about it. I think these are certain things that they would be able to better understand with all that we are going to witness tomorrow. Because today you talked about the medium itself. Tomorrow they will be about talk about practicalities of the VR process, and not just that. We've learned about the storytelling, attitudes, the cognition, behaviors. You told us about how the immersion, the experience of immersion increases from augmented reality to a 360-degree virtual reality. And I think there is one code that I'm going to take back, and like me, most other people are also going to take back home, is that immersive media is a growing industry, no matter where your interest lies. So, we may be having a lot of questions, but at the end, it is growing, and it is where we all ultimately have to go to. So with that, we expect a similar kind of an experience tomorrow. Thank you very much for enlightening us today, sir. And with this, I request Hani to please take the session forward. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Chief Associate Convener, ICAN4, to deliver the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Meghna. Thanks, Dr. Aaron Atkins, for telling us about emerging technologies in journalism. The virtual reality experience of storytelling was amazing. We all enjoyed thoroughly. Thanks, Dr. Atkins. Thanks to all the participants present here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to thank Dr. Aaron Atkins for this very much inspiring and informative session. I would like to extend my gratitude to Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School, Convener ICAN4, and Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School, Chief Associate Convener for ICAN4, for the ideation and planning for all the sessions. I would like to thank Dr. Maneswari Maheshwari, Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Ms. Shruti VS, Mr. Mohit Kishorwats, Ms. Mudita Raj, and Mr. Pramod Kumar Pandey for their constant support and guidance. A heartfelt thank to Mr. Ritik Ghosh, Mr. Sumantra Sarthi Das, Mr. Sachin Nair, and Mr. Yogesh Sharma for managing the all-over digital operations in ICAN4. I would like to thank our newsletter team, composed of both the students and faculty members, namely Ms. Sukirti Arora and Dr. Tina Bora, for constantly supervising and mentoring everyone. And also, I thank Mr. Mohammad Kamil and Ms. Krishna Pandey for working around the clock in all the press proceedings. You can keep a check on our press proceedings on the official page of ICAN. I'd also like to thank Mr. Anmol Mehta from our DME family and Mr. Sumohit Nirala from one of our knowledge partners, KR Mangalam University, for tirelessly working in making our event look more beautiful digitally so that it could help for office to Felix designs. I would also like to thank our entire team, all faculty members and students who have worked day and night facing all the challenges and obstacles of the pandemic to make the conference happen.
Lastly, I thank all the participants who joined this session. Dear participants, I request you to please take a minute and fill the feedback form through the link provided in the chat box. Your every feedback matters to us. I request everyone to follow our social media handles for more updates and information. Don't forget to visit the DME website and the ICAN4 micro websites for all details. Stay tuned with us for the upcoming sessions. We are looking forward to the 8th day filled with knowledge, expertise, and deliberations on the wide era of topics. At 10 a.m., we have panel discussions on production, reception, and distribution of Indian cinema in Australia. We have technical session 7 at 11:30 on fake news and discriminatory content during COVID-19 pandemic. At 3:30 p.m., we have a panel discussion 5 on episodic storytelling and short format, The Indian Spectator. At 6:30 p.m., we have a workshop 3 on emerging technology in journalism, 360-degree virtual reality storytelling, practical and approachable. With an incitement to see you all tomorrow in this wonderful lineup of the sessions, I, Hani Khurana, take your leave. Good night, everyone. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.